AAA developers and publishers are playing it too safe.
And it's time for them to stop letting indie developers take all the biggest risks. Let's talk about it.
Tam, what are we talking about today? Why are we talking about this?
Well, Lucy, first of all, we have to do our usual disclosure and say we are not developers. We are not publishers. We can only speak from our perspective. And in some cases, to those who have like in-depth knowledge of, you know, the realities of making games, the industry, they might feel the stuff we're saying is wild and inaccurate, which probably true. In all likelihood, true. But these are just our thoughts. In the FTC, Xbox, PlayStation beef, an instance where information about how much Sony and PlayStation spent on certain games was revealed, and the figures were quite significant.
Revealed.
Revealed. It was very much revealed.
Yeah.
Uncovered.
Unintentionally.
Yeah.
Poorly.
Unredacted.
Poorly, more like underlined.
Yeah. So that all that together got us thinking about what is the industry putting in and what is it getting out? And what could it be getting out instead?
You know, we finally got the scope of games like The Last of Us Part 2, Horizon Zero, Forbidden West,
Dawn West.
Ultimately, I mean, they look expensive, and guess what? They are. They're super expensive. Last of Us Part 2 is like, after somewhat of a 5-year development, $200 million. Mm-hmm. Horizon Forbidden West, somewhere of a 5-year development, $212 million.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
But also, they look like it.
Yeah, and it's important to note that this figure is kind of the totality of development, which is development and also marketing and various other things. Before we launch into our kind of discussion on this, the thing that we don't want to be misconstrued or misinterpreted in is like our opinion on those games. So we'll say very clearly, like, we like those games / understand them / appreciate them to various degrees. And by no means are we saying like they hold no value or the money spent on them is money poorly spent. That's
because
not
it clearly made
it's not.
a
They
ton of money.
And they're beloved titles.
Yes.
They are also incredibly safe. Beautiful, fun, engaging, compelling, heartfelt, whatever you want to say, but very safe. If you wrote out what those games are on paper and then properly redacted, not a PlayStation redacted. We're talking legal redacted. Anything that's like a identifying factor, a name, a giveaway about the context of what it takes in. I bet you they sound exactly like many other games on the market. There's no meaningful or distinguishing factor or standout element of them. And by extension, that means they're not really doing anything to push the medium or design or anything else forward in a meaningful way.
They're expensive. They're really well put together. The systems in which they implement are extremely put together, but those systems are things that are more or less just being implemented on top of other systems that we have seen just over the years of design development. Yes, these games are solid.
Yes.
Like what they do are exceptional, but I don't walk away from some of these bigger budget AAA games with a sense of like growth or wonder or inspiration that sometimes or most cases you often get with smaller scale games.
It's important that there's probably people watching this game like shouting at us. We get it. Sometimes you just don't need to push the medium forward. Sometimes you just want to give cool, shiny thing, make feel good when press button. And I love that too. And like, that's exactly what you're saying. But the question then becomes like, if that's all these big companies are doing, who is out there figuring out the things that is keeping the medium fresh and evolving and elevating it and fighting off the staleness that happens? And the answer is, it's the indies.
Pause it. Quick sidebar. Top 5 indie games that punch above their weight.
Vampire Survivors, Celeste, Hades, Dead Cells, Chained Echoes, which is a recent game, RPG, very early Final Fantasy Chrono Trigger era that I love. You?
Kentucky Route Zero.
Why?
It's unlike anything I've ever played.
It's small teams of developers and small publishers that make games that cost a fraction of a Last of Us or Horizon budget and made by a tiny team.
I have this thing where I usually believe that indies tend to reflect what is missing or what has been absent from the AAA space. And as a result of that, you often get a lot of indies that are revisiting older formats in games, like, you know, rather nostalgic formats from maybe the 90s, and then kind of like re-innovating them, repurposing them in like a new lens of modern game design. But you also get like stories and things that are like not people, the sort of stories and things that people aren't willing to take risks on.
Each of these indie games, they are a memorable moment within video games. Like, and a lot of blockbuster games aren't. Like, I would say Last of Us 2 is one of those where it is a memorable moment. Horizon, the first one maybe, but like the second one, I don't think that's going to be remembered in the long run. However, Binding of Isaac, like, that is going to be remembered for its impact on roguelikes. PUBG is going to be remembered for what it did to Battle Royale. Amnesia has redefined modern survival horror, which you talk about in Kurt Locker.
Yeah.
Shovel Knight, again, is one of those instances of going back.
Yeah, it was a game that used the aesthetic of the past that like founded on the foundation of the things that like we love from old NES games, but then ended up creating something that was innovative to that very specific era. In this modern age that is now influencing modern games.
It took the DuckTales bounce mechanic and like put it into a game that reminds us of how we loved those games in the past, and like that was a major moment. At one point also, it's easy to forget, Minecraft was an indie game. Representation, race, or gender, sexuality, or overall inclusivity in any meaningful way was spearheaded and is spearheaded by these indie games, and it's now making their ways into the bigger budget games.
And it's interesting too that we keep talking about The Last of Us Part 2 because I mean that's just the thing that we talked about, but that is a game that like is a massive step forward in the AAA mainstream space when it comes to LGBTQ plus representation of inclusivity, but that isn't without years and years and years and years of a certain corner of the industry, of certain developers, artists, and storytellers that like put that step forward.
It is amazing and wonderful, and it shows off the power of indies, but it's also important to remember that these games and the risks and the implementations come at significant like risk and danger. And that's a danger and a risk that is not shared by blockbuster or major companies. For indie devs, like the failure or success of an idea or a fresh genre or whatever it may be could redefine the fate of that studio, the publisher, the individual people that make it.
Forgotten City is one of those games that I always think about because the dude who made it gave up his career in law. He was a successful lawyer. His whole plan was like, I'm going to take like 2 years to make Forgotten City. 4 years later, he's still working on it to the point in which he no longer qualifies to be a lawyer, so he can't even go back to his backup career. He would have to restart his career all over again. It's stories like that where it's like, that was a make or break moment.
We talked about this earlier, and the analogy we came up with is, imagine if your weird neighbor tried to invent a brand new flavor of ice cream and bet their entire life on it.
And you just have to be like, good luck.
Yeah. Your neighbor should not be doing that. You know who should be doing that? Haagen-Dazs. Haagen-Dazs should
and what,
be doing
and what does Haagen-Dazs do? Coffee beans in their ice cream and make it a big new deal.
What is the best ice cream you've had?
I've ever had?
Yeah.
Honestly, whiskey goat cheese fig. So good. And I got it from a small joint back home in upstate New York. One location, couple people work there. They're just these artisans of their little ice cream craft.
They're an indie developer.
Buttered popcorn ice cream that's just like has like popcorn kernels in it.
Making games on the scale of Last of Us and Horizon that PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo do is also risky.
Return.
Yeah, it's risky in a different way. And it's not easy to just come up with a wacky idea or a new genre and just be like, I'm just going to do this, especially when you've got like execs breathing down your necks about like stock prices and shareholders and market share. But there is also evidence that it can pay off.
One of the really good examples of a studio that I think has made like really smart choices that is a bigger name, I would say it's a household name. They've done huge games, is Obsidian. Triple A experience. They've been around for a long time. They have a lineage in creating amazing foundation for what the medium is. And instead of like investing hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars in games that take 5 years to make, you don't see anything representing for 5 years. Instead, we get like Pentiment. Grounded. I think actually Grounded may have been like released in the same year, but
Outer
Worlds only a year or two before that.
We're not writing off the fact that those are also major risks. But they are risks that they are taken with the backing of a major company. And there's other games that also do that, like Tango Gameworks, Hi-Fi Rush. Like one of the coolest action games in a long time.
Double Fine is like one of the outliers to me because like they are ultimately did start as an indie studio. Now they're not indie because they got that Microsoft backing. Every game they were making, was like could very much have been their last.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think something really interesting that they as a company did was like, there was a time period after Brutal Legend where they were like, they scaled back and they started like having smaller teams go and make games. So that's how we got like Stacking, Custom Quest 1 and 2, Massive Chalice. And these are all games that were like distinctly unique, that weren't done before,
Yeah.
you know, that like
Yeah.
went on to influence like a certain way of thinking and a certain way of development.
Another one that I constantly think about of like a major company doing something interesting small is Narbacular Drop, which is a game that was created by students. Valve came along and like grabbed those people, and now we have Portal Outer Wilds, which was published by Annapurna, and it had a little more backing than most indie games, I guess, but I think of it as the most influential game of the last 10 years that has influenced nothing. I constantly think about the lost potential in that game and in the influence it should have. And there's also instances of teams trying, like big teams or well-known teams trying and doing something weird and actually having a major impact, which could be the argument for doing this for these major companies. Like at one time, a little company called From Software made a very hard game. Senior executives at Sony said were trash.
Yeah.
They were like, this is trash. No one's gonna like this. Get rid of it. They stuck with it, and now we have an entire genre.
And now we can't escape it.
We can't, like, for the period after Dark Souls, like everyone was making a Dark Souls.
And now we have, you know, like Star Wars.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know?
Star Wars making it.
But would Star Wars have done that? You know, like would Star
Yeah.
Wars have ever been in a position before
Yeah.
to have redefined a genre in such a way, a game genre?
Remedy is another studio that does that a lot, like Control.
I mean,
It's got indie sensibilities in every aspect of it.
that is not a, you know, trying to sell that game to anyone without like trying to tell them what the story of that
Yeah.
game is, and like
It sounds like a dude who makes ice creams is trying to make a game.
Yeah.
I made a goat cheese ice cream, and now I'm going to make a game about a building that no one can go in or out of, and no
like,
one's...
okay, all right, and then somehow, you know, here we are. Remedy has like, I mean, like Remedy has the clout from like, you know,
Yeah.
from what they've done, and I think the same thing could be said for like what is coming in Alley Week 2.
Alley Wake?
Alley Wake.
Ellie McBeal's back?
Alley
Hell
McBeal
yeah.
2. That's how big. Alan Wake 2 does have multiple protagonists.
Ally
after all.
McBeal's one of them, apparently.
Alan Wake 2 and Remedy is a good example because like that does feel like a risk.
Yeah.
You know, you don't see detective games at that much of a scale being put in the AAA space.
I feel like the best example of what we want is a game that is very divisive. I'm going to talk about it, but I feel like it is perfect in my mind for what the ideal scenario is, and it's Death Stranding. Not
But it
perfect,
is remarkable.
but remarkable, interesting, and unlike anything else out there. Put that alongside something like Horizon, Last of Us Part 2, and while the latter two games are definitely entertaining, with The Last of Us especially because its storytelling and its characterization had a lot of weight and impact, neither of them move the needle for the industry. I would argue that Death Stranding, on the other hand, moves the needle further than any of those two do. And that is the point that we're making. Big developers and publishers have the strongest safety nets. So it's time for them to stop letting indies take the biggest risks and start taking a few leaps of faith of their own for the greater good. Lucy, thank you for joining me once again.
Did you just call me Lucy?
You can find me on Twitter at Tamoor H. Where are you?
At Lucy James Games.
We'll be back with another episode of Spot On next week. If you're watching this, you know, leave a comment, thumbs up, subscribe, share it. We want to make some more. See you next week. Bye.